Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We are very happy today to have Mark Copeland with us to talk about value analysis committee. And it's a topic that comes up very often with our customer who are usually, small to medium sized company, manufacturing company outside the US. And there's a lot of red tape that they don't understand. They're not sure what it is. And what we want to explore today with you, Mark, is what's a value analysis committee. So let me introduce you a little bit. I think you are a basketball fan, if I'm not mistaken. You started in '98 in pharma with Pfizer, grew, and went to other company. But officially in 2004, I think you jump in the med device industry with L5 Surgical, and then Globus Medical, and then partner at 10X Medical, and now a VP of Sales at 3T Medical System. So, like roughly 20 years in the pharma industry, almost 30 years in the healthcare system. So I guess you did learn something about how to navigate the healthcare system. So welcome, Mark.
Well, hey, thank you, Stephan, for having me on. And yes, when you describe it that way, I'm like, man, I am as old as I feel. Yes, yeah, I've been in the business, been selling medical for 28 years, been in med device for 20 years, selling in hospitals, ambulatory surgery centers, and now sort of large integrated health systems, which is sort of the background as to these value analysis committees that we'll get into. So, and I've called on every specialty that I think, except for gastroenterology, and I don't know how they got lucky that I haven't been, but we've called on every specialty, darn near every type of healthcare facility in the country.
So my first question, how did you get that title at the Value Analysis Whisperer, and why is it an important topic for you?
Yeah, so first of all, anybody that nicknames themselves something is a weirdo. We tend to make fun of those folks. So I did not come up with this nickname. About 10 years ago, I was working in a couple of health systems in the U.S., of all places, South Central Pennsylvania, and it was they sort of adopted this value analysis committee process. We'll talk about that earlier than many places. It's now nationwide, everywhere sort of has some process. But these facilities were very early on, and I don't know why. They just were. And I was working for a company at the time, Globus Medical, that's now the number 2 spine company in the world. But they were still an emerging growth company in the U.S., and they were unbelievably good at new product development. So it was a salesperson's dream. You constantly had something new and theoretically better, but you had to, in my case, like I couldn't just go to the Dr. Stephan and Dr. Stephan's like, hey, I like this, bring it to my case Tuesday. It was, hey, I like this. We now need to get this approved by sort of the business people in the hospital at the time, in small health systems. So I'm standing at a scrub sink, and I've gotten pretty good at this and getting things approved. And I'm standing at a scrub sink with a surgeon, and I was like, hey, are you sure you really want this? Because and he's like, yeah. And he's like, but do you think we can get it approved? And I'm like, come on, of course we can. Like, have we ever not been able to get something approved? And he's like, man, you're like the value analysis. You're like that dude who whispers the horses. You're like that horse whisperer, except for value analysis. And of course, we both burst out laughing because it's absurd. But we got that product approved, and he'd be like, hey, there's the value analysis whisperer, and you sort of get embarrassed, but it stuck. And so finally, I sort of said, all right, I'm going to put it on my LinkedIn profile, and I get asked about it. I get made fun of it sometimes, but it's memorable, so I stick with it. But yeah, I didn't give myself that. A surgeon I think it was about 12 years ago now, made fun of me in an operating room as we were getting ready to go into a case, but it stuck. So that's how I got the nickname.
Well, I like it. I like the story, and it seems to be a passion anyway, so that's always a good thing. Yeah. So let's dig into it, obviously, what it is. What's a VAC? What's a value analysis committee exactly?
Right. So so a value analysis committee tends to be, just generally speaking, a group of people from different departments within a health system. So when we talk about health systems, you'll hear some people talk about integrated delivery networks, and you can almost use them the same way. But you're talking about, in the United States, on average, most health systems nowadays are 8 to 10 hospitals, a couple of ambulatory surgery centers spread out over a region. It can be a couple of states. Some of them are large. Like when you think of HCA, they have something like 150 hospitals, and but the vast majority are sort of in the U.S. are sort of smaller health systems, and they have a committee that decides on what I would call, generally speaking, new product requests that tend to come from their clinical teams throughout the system. So gastroenterology could say, hey, we'd love to have this thing. Radiology could be saying, could we get a new CT machine? There's a new one that works better, right? Or oftentimes the operating room, because they're 60%, the operating room tends to be about 60% of the revenue in a hospital still to this day. They tend to have a lot of new products that surgeons want within specialties. And 15 years ago, again, I would call on Dr. Stephan. You go, hey, I like this. I'd like to use this. I got 5 lap choles next week. Can I use this? And for most med device reps and companies at that point, mission accomplished. The surgeon wants it. The surgeon got whatever he or she wanted. But this changed. And these committees were put in place to sort of assess, hey, because they're buying at scale, they're bigger entities. Hey, should we, like, I know Dr. Stephan wants it, but like, do all of our surgeons want it? Do we really need this? We have an agreement with another company. How do we analyze the value of this new product that Dr. Stephan requested? Because it's kind of complex. Like, we're not general surgeons. We're from infection control. We're from supply chain. So who you see on these committees tends to be a representative from the C-suite, although they're not necessarily involved, generally speaking, except for large purchases. But it tends to be supply chain, infection prevention, believe it or not, staff education now has a role at it, risk management, revenue integrity, like all of these things that people are like, what do they do? Why would they have a comment or an opinion on this product Dr. Stephan wants? Well, there's more to than just what he wants. So these committees were formed. They have a process. Oftentimes they meet once a month, and they get bombarded with these new requests, and they're trying to prioritize them. And they need to make sure they're not breaking any contracts. They'd like to give Dr. Stephan what he wants, but they can't just do one-offs. If you think about it, it's buying for a large entity, just like you would if you were selling to Home Depot. The Home Depot manager who runs first shift at the Home Depot in some place in North Carolina doesn't get to say, hey, we want to put this on our shelf. There's a whole process they have to go through. They have to look at the clinical and the business. And this is a relatively recent phenomenon, Stephan. So like for folks coming in from outside the United States, they've heard about it, but they may not have experienced it. And it is a whole new step in the process that's complex, although it's not as complex as it seems. And it's another way to stall. So if you're prepared for it, you're more likely to get through it. I would almost think of it as like value analysis customs. If you think of that, you need certain things for it. It doesn't mean you automatically get in. Yeah. But you need to be aware of it. So was that honestly, is that kind of helpful as to what these committees are?
It is a well definition of what it is. The situation, a lot of time, we get a customer, they got their 510K and they're ready to start selling. And obviously we sit down with them, we try to explain everything they will need. And they're very proud of their product, and they should be, obviously, but they work on this, they spend a lot of money. And they say, well, we went to a convention in the US, we saw some US physician, and they said they want it. So we are already customer. And I'm like, time out. There's more into it. Because I think what you touch on it, many 20 years ago, physicians, when they wanted something, they were able to get it. Now it changed. It doesn't mean that you have a physician who wants something that the product will be approved or get on the formulary, right?
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, today I would estimate, and this is me estimating, but I've talked to companies and reps and experience that I still sell into health systems myself, right? So I'm an everyday practitioner of this. I would estimate new product requests approval rate is probably somewhere around 3 to 5%. I mean, it's incredibly low. So you have three surgeons or three, you have an emergency department who says, we want this new thing we saw. If they don't request it the right way and do some things that I sort of end up teaching to a lot of them, their failure rate is extraordinarily high, despite being a great product, despite being better for patients, hopefully, despite being like it's gone through the FDA, it has its 510K approval, maybe even has clinical data. It's this, but it's not that hard to navigate. But it's not as if these VAC committees stand up and say, "Hey, Stephan, just so you know, here's everything we need. Here's what we're looking for." And you're like, "Oh, that's helpful." There's none of that. Like, it's very opaque. So it's difficult. And I will tell you what we see with small med device companies in particular. They don't know much about it. They don't prepare for it. And then it stalls them out across the country. And their investors are concerned. And we see it all the time. It's a delay and a filter that the more you're prepared, you can actually get through it. But it will add time to your process from surgeon or doctor going, I love this thing, to doctor getting to use it. It's very difficult.
Is there any difference between, for example, teaching hospital or ambulatory surgery center? Do we still need to go through a VAC with ASC?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yes, but ASCs they have sort of the same process. They don't necessarily call it value analysis, but they still do sort of the same process. It's just when you think about risk management, revenue integrity, basically the finances, supply chain, that role is served by a group of about 3 or 4 in an ASC, and the administrator, the director of nursing, the sort of business manager of the ASC, and to an extent, the board of owners. So you get answers much more rapidly, which is good. And in some places that are good, if you came in with a really good, compelling value case for your new product, they'll give you an answer in 2 to 3 weeks. But they still do what you and I would consider value analysis. They just don't necessarily call that at ASCs.
Okay.
Then you go to academic centers. They're at the opposite end, partly because they don't really do, without risk of offending my academic facility friends, they don't really do anything fast. So it takes longer, and you have to be really on your game, and it will still take longer than you want. So they're sort of the opposite end of the adoption curve, oddly. You might think they would be more rapid to adopt new technology, but the processes are slower. So I've had some companies go like, hey, well, we sell mostly into ASC, so we can avoid the whole value analysis committee thing, right? I'm like, you will avoid that big committee you're scared of, but you're going to go through sort of a very similar process.
Yeah.
So if you prepare for it, the preparation is the same, frankly.
Okay.
It's just easier at ASC. Yeah. Hopefully I answered your question.
So how long it takes? Like if we talk about academic, hospital, is it a month, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months?
Yeah. On average right now, if you're not really super prepared for it, that 5% that does get through is still usually 6 to 12 months. And I hear people complaining out longer, right?
Yeah.
Out to 18 months. Now, I will tell you, the reason why it takes so much longer is they're not very well prepared. And that's what I end up teaching a lot of times is here's how to prepare for it. If you have these things, you'll be in a much better position. If you have everything you need and you have a great value prop, and I describe it this way, if you hit every green light going through town, right, going through the value analysis town, it's still going to take 90 days to probably 120 because they're still going to put your company, your product through a due diligence that they want to look at the MAUD website to make sure there's no adverse event. They want to make sure you're a company that does business the appropriate way. They want to make sure that they're not breaking any contracts they have with a competitive vendor, right? So there's a due diligence process that we can't really speed up. We can just make sure we're prepared when they ask for that stuff. So best case scenario in those academic centers, generally speaking, is probably 3 to 6 months. Ambulatory surgery centers, it's 10 to 15 days.
Okay.
Their due diligence is just faster. That make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. Sometimes customers come to us and say, well, it's going to be easy because our product is cheaper. So is it Is it how it works? Because I'm
Yeah.
cheaper, I will go through.
You would think it is, and it is a little bit, but it's not as easy. It doesn't make it that much easier. Partly because these facilities are so busy, and they don't always know what they're paying for their competitor, and they don't. And so, like I would say, it is easier. But think of all the commercials you see that say, "Hey, we'll spend 15 minutes, we'll save you 15% on your car insurance." And when's the last time you actually sat down and did that? You know you're going to save money. It's guaranteed you're going to save money. So you're too busy, you don't need it, whatever. So it does make it a little bit easier, but you'd actually be surprised that you have to sort of show your competitor's price and pull their part numbers and those things, and to show it because it's not as obvious. And these people, frankly, these people in these committees and these business units have a lot going on. If you don't make it really easy for them, they're not going to do the math for you. You have to do it for them. So being cheaper let's say less expensive. Cheap sounds cheap. Less
Yeah,
expensive
wrong word.
does help. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's not the massive catapult that I think sometimes people think it might be. But it does help. It's absolutely helpful.
Yeah, because we see that trend where those healthcare system they try to pay less for the devices so they can make more money because
Yeah.
the CPT
Yeah.
code reimbursement is fixed. So obviously they can save money there. And a lot of time people come to us, they have a 510K, and the 510K pathway is, you have a similar product, could have some benefit, but
Right.
it's not always the thing, the true.
It's hard to call your product innovative, even though it is and might be, when you go through the 510K process, because you immediately have to list the predicate devices. So
Yeah.
you're kind of like, hey, we're like them, but we're not, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I've had supply chain people say it to me, like, hey, you said you're super innovative, but you went through the 510K process. Just how innovative could you be?
Yeah.
And you might be right and they might be wrong, but you have to have that sense about it. So.
Yeah, yeah. Um, does it cost something to go through a value analysis? Do you have to pay as a manufacturing company or distributor?
No, just blood, sweat, and tears. That's what it costs you. No, not really.
Okay.
It's you. The funny thing is, I when I work with companies, they usually have everything they need. It's more they don't know how to package or present it. But in most cases, I deal with small med device companies all the time. Very rarely do they not have what they need. It's just they don't know how to put it together. So the good news is I don't think it's going to necessarily cost anybody any more money. It's
Yeah.
just going to be time and effort and know-how.
So, is it possible for a company just to develop a standard value analysis, document that will fit all value analysis committees? So, are they all the same? That's my question.
Yeah. So here's the good news. They are mostly the same. They mostly ask for the same 8, 10, 12, 15 things, right? Depending on your product. So the good news is you can create what most people would describe as a VAC pack. And I would describe it as almost like your resume or your CV. So, but I also tell people your resume or your CV doesn't get you a job. How you present you gets you the interview or the job. And then at some point they say, oh yeah, hey, I need you to fill out those employment documents. I need this. Excuse me. I would urge you to think of it that way because you will need it. But you'll also need something that most companies haven't done, but you probably can, is you need to create a business case for your product, right? So using your example, you're going to have a VAC pack that they say, hey, we need your W-9. We need to know your part numbers. We need to know a link to the mod site so we can quickly do our due diligence, right? There's going to be things like that. It's the same. I did one point, we bought a product from Stryker, and I had to get all these products reapproved in the same hospitals. So we filled out about 538 of them. They were all the same. Good news. Sorry. So that was good. But the issue is you need to be able to make a business case, and that can vary slightly from place to place, although not much. So we usually suggest having a pro forma,
Okay.
and um, and sometimes, usually having it presented through an executive business summary. I call it a home run business summary because there's a couple of things I've added. But once you make a VAC pack, and you're good to go. But again, think of it as your resume, not your sales and marketing pitch that's going to get you approved. It will not. I promise you. One thing I can promise you, your VAC pack will not get you approved. Your business case and your clinical case get you approved. Your VAC pack is like your employment documents you send in so they can make sure that you get paid,
Yeah.
and get hired appropriately. So hopefully that helps, Stephan.
Yeah, yeah, that's clear. Um, One word that we keep hearing with VAC is getting a champion.
Mm,
What is it? Do we
yeah.
need a champion?
Yes. So here's my experience, and here's what I tell everybody in champions. You need clinical interest. You can even call them clinical champions. But the day of clinical champions getting your product approved, meaning a doctor or nurse who just like, Stephan, this is the best thing. I'm so glad you bought me this or brought this to me. I'm going to get you approved. And that person getting it approved, those days are deader than Elvis. They don't work anymore. You need to start with clinical champions.
Yeah.
And what I urge people to say is then now we're going to make a business case because this is what the health system or the ambulatory surgery center is going to require. So the health system or ambulatory surgery center, they're going to require, which of my doctors want this? What clinical team needs this? Do they want it? You absolutely have to start there. But the days of tucking in behind a big, aggressive surgeon and letting him or her get you approved, and the asteroid has struck, and does not work anymore. And frankly, doctors don't like doing it anymore. Many of them are employed by health systems, right? And they're not very good at it. That's why we have to get good at it. And that's what I learned. So you do need clinical interest. Champions help. Human beings are human beings. They're still influenced if a person's a big, important clinical person. But the importance has been diluted by the size of the health systems and the fact that now these doctors are employees 70% of the time, right? They don't have the same juice, and they know it. So, when we talk about that all the time. I actually find you not only you sometimes need a different kind of champion. And what I have found and I tell everybody this stuff, I have no secrets. The people that run the business unit in your service line at a hospital or health system, there's usually a nurse, usually a director, or a VP. They're the people who understand both the clinical and the business part because they have to. They're the ones who are the best champions if you have a good value analysis, a good value prop. I find them much more effective than the doctors. Doctors don't have time, aren't very good at it.
Yeah, yeah. Especially for those Me Too product, I don't think a champion will jump in to say, I want this guide wire or this introducer or whatever,
Right.
Maybe they will do it for a new robot or something that's, high end and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. You know what they say to you now, Stephan? Like if you and I went into a place and got a doctor, pick a doctor, somebody in cardiology, right? And they're like, hey, I really like this thing you brought to me, Stephan and Cope. Here's what they used to say. Bring it in Tuesday and we'll use it. Then these value analysis committees started. Now they're like, hey, we got to get this approved, but I think I know how to. Now what they say is, okay, Stephan, Cope, this looks cool. Let me know when it's approved. And then they turn their back on you, right? Like that's why it's on us, not them. And so anybody that tells you we just need a better clinical champion, I'd say I think 2015 called strategies changed. You need a new strategy. How about that?
Yeah, obviously. Well, the medtech industry is evolving very fast. So obviously you need to be on top of it.
Yeah.
So it seems that there's no way to go around the value analysis committee to get a product, on formulary now.
No, and nor should there be, right? So these things were designed basically because from 2010 until today, you see mergers of health systems 5 to 6 a month every month in the United States. So they're just getting bigger and bigger. Yeah. And you need to put some controls in place, right, for quality. And you can't, like, anybody that tries to get in the back door is going to be shown the door pretty quickly. It's just not, this is the world in which we work and live. And some people get frustrated by it. I hear it. Like, I understand it. Well, you can either get frustrated or you can leave the industry or you can figure out how to win in it. And we get products approved all the time. It's just a different process. And it's not through magic or sorcery or like, it's through good business techniques. And that's why I think like most of these companies, when I get them talking about they actually have a really good business case. It might just be less expensive, right? But or maybe, hey, we're a little bit more, but we save X downstream in the clinic or what, like they always have a good business case. They just aren't great at presenting it to healthcare. And that's where we sort of end up coming in, helping them understand to be confident in it, but they always have a good one.
One of the last question I have though is a very tricky one. So do you see any difference with product getting approved depending on the country of origin? So does US product versus Chinese product or Germany, Italy, do you see any difference? Does the VAC look at this?
They do, although I don't know, I've not heard somebody say, hey, we prefer not to have products that I would say people in a position where they're making the decisions. I've not heard somebody say, hey, we prefer to have them from Germany or Switzerland or US made versus say China right? However, I would say these VAC committees are still led by human beings. And my guess is there is some of that. I don't mean it in a pejorative way, but there's probably a level of prejudice to the people would say like, hey, we don't necessarily want products coming in from China if we have a United States or a made version. And I think that's just politics. And I don't know, we have new administration in place in the United States, and I wouldn't be surprised if, that affects some of this. So I would say I've not ever heard it, but I think we'd be fools to think there isn't some of it probably out there, So,
but we can take for granted that in general, if it's a very high-end quality product at a good price, it should do well.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, Stephan, like we talk a lot about this stuff, but I probably am remiss in saying like number one is patient care. Like it's still number one. It's healthcare. It's the product healthcare delivers. It is still the number one priority, and no one should ever lose confidence in that or sight of it. And I've had VAC committee members who are not clinical people say to me, Mark, trust me. And I do. Patient care is number one for us. We just need to know why we should buy something new versus what we're currently doing. It's not that we have something against new products, just the opposite. But they're hard, they're complex. We need to understand them. And that's really what this boils down to. So I would say to anybody that's creating these things, keep it coming. We need it.
Yeah.
And you just may have to add a couple of things to your repertoire to get it into the United States healthcare end user hands, the doctor, the nurse, and then into the patient. But you'll get there. Yeah.
It's very interesting. I like this conversation. What will be your last word?
The last word is I urge everyone to think about their product as if they are a C-suite member of an ambulatory surgery center or health system and say, how would I look at this from a business standpoint, not just clinical? You have to make two cases, a clinical, hey, this is better for patients. It's not even a question. But how do we afford it? What do we get out of it? Like, does it save us money? Does it cost us money? Does it give us a strategic advantage over the health system or surgery center down the street? And it's the way everybody in business thinks. Healthcare is just sort of rapidly coming to that as well. So I would say, as you're sitting there thinking about your clinical benefits, take 10 minutes and go, what's the business benefit? Like, why would a place want this that's not just clinical? And you're already halfway down the right pathway on it. And plenty of smart people listening to you guys. they just have to trust that it matters because
Yeah.
it does. Yeah, yeah. Hopefully that helps.
Oh, thank you so much. This is
This is
great. It was a
great.
lot. It's pack of information that our customer will love for sure. Thank you again
Oh,
for
you're
joining us. I see something in the background, a basketball T-shirt, something that was. Well, are you still coaching?
Uh, no, not anymore. I just still talk to a lot of my coaches, but I'm around the game because I'm old. All the people that I played with, played against, coached with, coached against are now head coaches, general managers. So I know a lot of people in the big level of basketball in the NBA, NCAA, and so and I sort of believe business is a team game. I sort of learned that for
Uh-huh.
basketball. So
Yeah.
I like to have these things behind me because these were the teams that mattered to me. And I think like helping people in small med devices given has been the closest thing I've ever gotten to reliving this basketball stuff from when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. That was so long ago. So yeah, that's what it is. It's kind of who I am.
Yeah.
I believe business and life are team games, So
Yeah.
like, hopefully I made you laugh, Stefan.
Yeah, that was great. So thank you again. It was very interesting. And talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.